Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Bradbury Group, New Zealand's best weekly political argument, hosted by the militant, Marxist, anti-Santa, Martin Bradbury. The Bradbury Group is streamed live on Rover, Sky TV, YouTube and Facebook. Proudly sponsored by Wātea, journalism you can trust. Let the arguments begin.
Kia ora Aotearoa. The true demarcation of power in a late-stage capitalism, liberal, progressive democracy is the 1% richest plus their 9% enablers versus the 90% rest of us. Welcome to the Bradbury Group, New Zealand's best weekly political argument. I'm your host, the editor of the daily blog, Martin Bradbury. Bomber to my comrades, Mr. Bradbury if you're nasty. My pronouns are us and we. Coming up on this evening's show, the political panel all-stars tonight are Sir Roger Douglas. Yes, that Roger Douglas. TāmakiMakaurauby-election candidate and Labour Party heavyweight Peeni Henare. Political commentator Matthew Tukaki and NZCTU Economist superhero Craig Renney. Tonight's 1-on-1 in 10 is Mr. Speaker. Speaker of the House, Gerry Brownlee, on the Māori Party MP ruling and the importance of the Institute of Parliament. What other political podcast brings you the Speaker of the House, a by-election candidate and a Knight of the Realm? Are you not entertained? Shout out to Chewy from BHN moderating tonight's YouTube page. Good evening to all the Bradburyistas online watching right now. Your comments will appear on screen as we go. And our Twitter panel this evening is Tim Selwyn and Jamie Daly. Before all that, however, is this week's War on News. Last week, Minister of Defence Judith Collins met new military recruits and warned them to be prepared for war. Before we comment on war threats, however, what the hell is she wearing? She looks like Darth Vader's grandmother. It's got a Gestapo meets the Handmaid's Tale vibe about it. I think we can all agree no one person should be wearing this much black leather unless you're in Destiny Church. As for the fur lining, did she kill something with her bare hands and skin it herself? Too many questions, not enough answers. I'm still not sure who the hell we're going to war with. Any carnivore you can shoot and tailor a gimp suit out of. Talking of confusion, the Deputy Prime Minister David Seymour told the 2025 Local Government New Zealand Conference that Māori prayer and cultural impact assessments were the reason why power prices and food bills were high. Cool story, bro. Have you ever had a mate who, after lots of self-research online, comes out with some batshit crazy blame game on things that don't actually have anything to do with the issue other than highlight their terrifying bigotry? Yeah, well, we all have that mate now in our Deputy Prime Minister. It seems of David, Māori prayer is a Milton Friedman doom loop where capitalism goes to die. I'm waiting for David to start blaming climate change, earthquakes, milk spoiling, All Blacks losing, and eclipses on Māori prayer. If Māori prayer is the reason why power prices and food bills are so high, let's get our money's worth. Dear Maui, please smite David Seymour, the ACT Party, and burn Brooks' only pink jacket. And finally, in this week's War on News, over 50 million people in the United States are currently under heat alerts due to a dangerous heat wave. Record-breaking temperatures are being recorded, with some areas experiencing temperatures over 45 degrees Celsius. Hell is effectively more air-conditioned than America right now. Experts are noting that extreme weather events like this are becoming more frequent and intense due to climate change. Brothers and sisters, we're all going to die on a burning planet thanks to the lies of the petro-industrial complex and their polluter mates. To quote the great Mike Hosking, happy days. The political panel all-stars up shortly, whānau, but first this week's 1-on-1 in 10 with Speaker of the House, Gerry Brownlee. Kia ora, comrade. Welcome to the show and thank you for being available to the Fourth Estate. Your democracy is grateful.
You know how much I really do not like that term, comrade. not at all respectful.
Gerry, I have asked you on tonight's show, in the wake of the Parliament haka and the anger many in the Māori community and Pākehā community felt about that ruling, I have watched your career since you entered Parliament in 1996. I have had the good fortune of speaking with you privately many times, and as a Parliament TV tragic and political geek, I think you are one of our best speakers and are as genuinely passionate about the Institute of Parliament as I am. You are also a fellow podcaster, and I wanted to help your ratings out. Comrade, I know you are not racist, and that your ruling of disorderly conduct is a most valued parliamentary principle that threads back to centuries when King Charles I kicked in the doors of the Commons. Why was it important to refer Hana Rāwhiti, Rawiri and Debbie to the Privileges Committee for their haka? And why was it important to name Hana and ask the Sergeant-at-Arms to remove her if needed?
Well, let's be very clear. It wasn't about the haka as such. It's that when the decision was made by Hana to pick up the bill and rip it up, we were in the process of a parliamentary vote.
Right.
The Māori Party had just cast their vote. There were other votes to come, or at least a vote to be declared. And it is simply unacceptable that the process of Parliament is impeded in that way.
Yes.
Once that haka started, of course, there was the gallery all joined in. It was very organised, in my opinion. And then the three Māori Party members moved onto the floor of the House while it was in session and advanced upon particularly the ACT Party in what can only be described as an attempt to intimidate in some particular way. Bizarre, really, because the vote was clearly not going to be in favour of that bill progressing. But you can't have that. There's a lot of things that are tolerable in Parliament, but interfering with the process of a vote is not at all tolerable. Hana's actions in firstly casting the vote and then ripping up the bill and beginning the haka, I think that was totally appropriate that she should be asked to leave the House for a period of time. And ultimately, once I viewed the video a couple of times to have a look at, making sure I was in the right space, clearly she had to be referred to the Privileges Committee as well. As was your guest here tonight, Peeni Henare. He took an entirely different view at the Privileges Committee and, had a different outcome. So I think, a lot of the result of that Privileges Committee decision had to do with the way in which the Privileges Committee itself was treated by those who should have been looking for some sort of redemption, but clearly didn't want to receive it.
What do you say to those who argue the haka is tikanga?
That the haka, I'm sorry, I'm actually having a little bit of trouble hearing you from you. I don't know how to turn my machine up. I'm sorry, but in some circumstances that would be a blessing, but not here. Did you just ask me what was...
What do you say
to
what do you say to people who argue the haka is tikanga?
Well, we often have a haka at the end of treaty settlement bills. I'm sure there's been other occasions where the haka has been performed. And when everybody knows what's going on and it's recognised as being part of a continuum in a process, that's not the problem. The problem in this case was it was not notified. There was a degree of hijack and it did interrupt a vote. The key point is it interrupted a vote, the most crucial part of the democratic process inside Parliament.
Doesn't the context matter, Gerry? Māori had just endured a terribly divisive full frontal attack on the treaty in the form of the Treaty Principles referendum, which was a needlessly inflammatory virtue signal for ACT, and its defeat demanded a response from every Māori MP in the House, didn't it?
Well, why didn't they wait until the actual vote was recorded and the bill was lost? And then it would have been something that they might have decided they wanted to celebrate. Yeah. It would have been very, very easy had they told my office what was going on for us as a Parliament to accept that there might be that type of expression at the end of a vote, particularly given the nature of this particular piece of legislation.
Talking of tikanga, was the decision by the Privileges Committee to break their own tikanga with a manifestly unfair punishment that didn't have wide support within that committee?
Well, I'm not going to comment on the Privileges Committee. That's not appropriate. I get to refer people to it, but it is the architect of its own destiny, and it would be inappropriate for me to sort of cast any reflection upon the decisions that they make. I simply report those to the House.
Newsroom puts the Wellington Hikoi against the Treaty Principles referendum at 84,000 with one arrest for disorderly behaviour. The Parliament lawn protests had 5,000 and it led to a riot and 293 arrests. Who is more of a problem, the right or the left?
I don't think you should characterise it that way, because I think when that Hikoi arrived at Parliament, there would have been people from quite a range of political perspectives within that group. I thought it was a remarkable day because there was there was I suppose a notification of what was intended. That large crowd arrived at Parliament. They said that they'd be leaving by a particular time, and when they left, the grounds were spotless. And I think that's the sort of country we should aspire to, a country where you can have big protests like that. You can make a point, and it certainly made a point, but you don't have to get into that nasty side of things that I think we saw with the occupation.
That last question was facetious, but there is a deeper truth, and you as the speaker of our most important institute is facing it. How do we maintain political discourse and ensure physical threats and toxic harassment isn't part of it?
Well, you don't tolerate it. And I think that was another aspect of the recent Privileges Committee decision, because, as I said before, there were three members who advanced upon another party in what could have been considered a threatening manner. Now, the Privileges Committee decided that's what the case was, and so the penalty eventually said, no, there's no acceptability for that. And I don't think we should ever get to a point where that becomes acceptable.
I'm reading Daniel Hannan's How We Invented Freedom and Why It Matters, and when you get past all his property rights worship, he makes incredibly strong arguments about the values that underpin the Anglo-Saxon Westminster tradition, with its focus on free speech, no taxation without representation, the sovereignty of Parliament, regular elections, the rule of law, and defence of the individual. These all values built into our Parliament. As the Speaker of the House, why is democracy important?
Oh, well, if you can't separate democracy from freedom. If you have any other system, then you're putting in the hands of one or two people the whole, I suppose, bounds of how you can live your life. And I don't think that's something any of us want. One of the things that I think's interesting in New Zealand, I often ask myself, what if there was some sort of a group that wanted to mount a coup, overthrow the government and take over the place? I suspect they'd make no progress whatsoever, because in the end, even those who may not like a particular style of government, whether it's left or right, will recognise that they want to have a say. They don't want to hand it over to some small group of people. And, if you look around the world, the freedoms that are being impinged in all sorts of places are quite worrying. And I think we should be grateful that we have a country where you can have divergence of political views, quite disparate a range of opinion on about how the country should progress, but a recognition that a government is elected to govern, and the right of the opposition to oppose is also equally important.
Why shouldn't we expand the universal franchise to 16? 16 is the age of consent, and climate change will impact them far more than older voters. The UK is lowering the voting age to 16. Wouldn't New Zealand democracy benefit from doing it as well?
Well, the UK is not lowering it. They've got to go to a process at the next election to see if the UK public want to do that, as I understand it, and I'll be surprised if they do. I think young people these days have got so much on their plate. I get very worried when I see, people in that sort of age bracket angsting about things like climate change, all those school sort of strikes and everything else. There's almost creating a fear in them about the future, which I think is unreasonable. And the question then would be, well, who are they going to vote for? They're going to vote for, presumably, much older people to be able to represent them in some particular way. I just think you're putting too much on young people. 18 is a reasonable age. Most people are out of school at that stage. They're in their first stages of work or tertiary study, and I think they have a little bit more worldly approach to things. I think 16 is simply too young.
Does a unicameral parliament like ours need an upper house, and what do you think of a 4-year term?
Well, two questions there. The first thing is I'm not a fan of the 4-year term. I think everything that's claimed for it is pretty trite in lots of ways. We don't have that upper house at the moment. So if you had an upper house, then everything would take so much longer. Mm-hmm. And I think for that reason, I don't support an upper house either. I do note that other countries' upper houses, so Britain, for example, and Canada, another one, members of those particular upper houses are appointed for a very, very long time, not voted on, appointed. And in Canada, in the case of Canada, they're there till they're 75. In Britain, that's pretty much a lifetime appointment. I don't think it serves a lot of extra scrutiny on the legislative process, but a 3-year term most certainly does.
Finally, Mr. Speaker, Sir Roger Douglas is on the political panel tonight. Do you have any advice about being on the show from the Speaker of the House to a Knight of the Realm?
No, of course not. I've got a great deal of respect for Sir Roger. I remember one thing that he wrote, and he may remember this, in a book that he wrote a long time ago, where he said that if the entire New Zealand wool clip was manufactured into carpet, we wouldn't have enough production to be able to carpet the floors of California, or the demand for carpet and floors in California in any given year. And I think that sort of puts into perspective where New Zealand sits in the world and how we should approach trade, and recognise the challenges that some see we have are not that great if we do the hard work, make sure that our regulatory environment in New Zealand is sound, and get on with it, because it is that trade that provides the lifestyle that we have. So I would say to him, Sir Roger, if you've got anything new and innovative and exciting, make sure you get it out and don't get beaten down by the left who are surrounding you at the present time. Innovative thought is always a good thing.
Thank you, comrade. Invite me to your end-of-year drinks. Parliamentary security always freaked out when I turn up. Thank you.
You most certainly will receive that invitation, Mr. Bradbury. I think you add a great deal to the political discussion in this country.
Thank you, comrade. Thank you.
Don't use that word, comrade.
Okay, now to our political panel all-stars. Our first panellist is the Māori for all seasons. He's a political commentator, raconteur, and broadcaster at the mighty Wātea Network, media mogul and people's hero, Matthew Tukaki. Kia ora, comrade. Welcome to the show.
Good to be with you, Bomber.
One word to describe the week, please, sir.
Well, I don't think it's one word. I think it's more a couple of words strung together. Cost of living crisis.
Yes.
The fact of the matter is New Zealand's economy is between, $450, $480 billion or thereabouts. Māori economy between $150, $180 billion, so a portion of that with GDP involved, etc., etc. The reality is the average, if you have a look at the cost of living out there in the community right now, and just set aside the fact that a pound of butter is now $15 for a pound, $27 a kilo for beef mince, all of these different things are really putting pressure on everyday New Zealanders, whether they be Māori or non-Māori, makes no difference now. Because the truth of the matter is too, Bomber, that on average, I think from memory, the average weekly wage is around $1,500 or thereabouts. Again, don't quote me on these figures. Sir Roger might have some better data for me. But then you turn to other things, other indicators, such as the average cost of living per week is higher than the average amount earned by an individual. Yeah. Then you take into account the fact that we've got more than $6 billion on our credit cards. And so what we've got a lot of people keeping up with the Joneses off the fact that a great portion of their weekly income is taken up by either rent or mortgage repayments, and now they're living off their credit cards to buy their groceries. Yeah. So we have a real problem in this country. Yeah. So you can talk about all the whiz-bang stuff that you want, investment in infrastructure, all this other sort of stuff, which is meaningful to a degree if you believe in Keynesian economics, pardon my stroke. But you at some point you've got to double down on continuous public policy. Now, also far be it from me to talk about the sexual proclivities of a former ACT Party president, of which I will not do. I will not do, Bomber.
Oh, thank you.
Because that's just naughty business.
That is unfair.
Just naughty business. Irrespective of what my next door neighbour might want me to do. The Point Chevrolet's Glitterati set. Not interested. I think we need to focus on cost of living. So my words of the week, sorry for ranting on, a cost of living.
Our next panellist is a Labour Party heavyweight, spokesperson for defence, economic development, foreign affairs, Māori Crown relations, and associate spokesperson for health. He is currently the Labour Party candidate for the TāmakiMakaurauby-election, and every 10th sentence he speaks is up the waz. The Honourable Peeni Henare. Come mate, welcome to the show. One word to describe the week, please, sir.
Well, it won't be up the waz, but this week for me at least is hope. And that word is the word I want to use to describe the week because, as you so rightly pointed out, I am the candidate for the by-election. And off the back of what my colleague and good friend here has talked about with the cost of living, there's got to be hope somewhere. And I'm hoping that our discussion tonight might lend itself to it.
Before we go on, we've just heard the Speaker of the House. You performed the haka. You fronted the Privileges Committee and apologised for the disorder, but you refused to apologise for doing the haka. If the mana of Māoridom was challenged like that again in Parliament, would you haka and protest again?
I will do the haka again, and I've made it very clear that, in my maiden speech, I called Parliament an august institution. And the rules that the Speaker just rightly described there are rules that I believe in because they make it a level playing field for everybody. The politics that people carry in there, however, well, that's up to the individual, and that's where I'll stand by our people, and I'll do a haka any time of the day.
Sounds like a contender for the TāmakiMakaurauby-election, comrades. Our next panellist is joining us from Wellington. He's a left-wing superhero who fights for workers against the evil bosses. He's pretty much Harry Potter with a lightsaber. NZCTU economist Craig Renney. Kia ora, comrade. One word to describe the week, please, sir.
Kia ora, Bobber. One word from me is whining. Nicola Willis this week said that councils should stop whining. Well, hang on a second. These are councils that have been bankrupted because the government stopped Three Waters. There's a country that's got, as Matthew said, an inflation rate of 3.2% if you take away petrol. There are 10% more people on benefits than there were just a couple of months ago. A New Zealand citizen leaves the country every 7 minutes and 24 seconds permanently. That's not whining. That's legitimate complaint. And so that's my word of the week, whining. If you're out of touch, you use the word whining.
And last but certainly not least, he was awarded his knighthood for services to Milton Friedman and Voldemort. Left-wing parents tell their children that if they don't say their prayers in Te Reo, that he'll appear and steal their hospital. The architect of the neoliberal state, the harbinger of Rogernomics. Ladies and gentlemen, lock up your state assets. It's Sir Roger Douglas. Kia ora, comrade. Welcome to the show. One word to describe the week, please, sir.
Well, listening to you, it's obvious that you left the left and the Labour Party a long time ago.
I did, comrade. I did.
And
I
that
travelled
I'm the only
left.
one who stands up for their real principles. The thing is that over the last 50 years, New Zealand's politicians have been sending the country bankrupt in the name of the poor. And they haven't served the poor at all during that period of time. They've done this by spending billions of dollars and continue to spend billions of dollars on people who do not need government help or assistance and are quite capable of looking after themselves. And we are in a mess in this country. And if we're going to get out of it, we need to tell people the truth. And the truth is that politicians haven't done that for a long, long time.
It's going to be...
And it was Thomas Sowell who said,
yes.
You might know him,
yes,
American, black economist, brilliant mind. He said, if you want to help people, you tell them the truth. If you want to help yourself, you tell them what they want to hear. And the problem has been for a long time that politicians in New Zealand have told people what they want to hear from their polling rather than to tell them the truth. And the truth is we're in a hell of a mess, and it's going to take some guts to get out of it.
It's going to be a fun show. Okay, comrades, let's get into the show's tonight's political topics. They are Issue 1, $6 billion infrastructure announcement, hollow promise or great leadership. Issue 2, inflation and drooping economic growth. What radical ideas should New Zealand try? And Issue 3 tonight, Minister of Defence warns new recruits to be ready for war. Who are we going to fight? Let's begin tonight with the $6 billion infrastructure announcement made by the government this week. Is it a hollow promise or great leadership from the growth government? Craig, it turns out that while this sounded like new investment, the truth is that all of it has already been announced. Why is National trying to fool us into looking like they are trying to generate economic activity?
Well, because the government's frankly desperate to tell a story because the economy is about to go backwards again. The Reserve Bank right now is forecasting that at the next quarter, the economy will fall by 0.3%. ASB, ANZ are all predicting a fall. And let's be really clear. This is a Clayton's announcement. It's a sign of a desperate government, right? You've got the government spends on physical infrastructure about $12 billion every year.
Yes.
So if it didn't spend $6 billion over the next 6 months, that would actually be a cut.
Yeah.
So this is just perfectly normal spending. In Budget 23, the last budget of the last government,
yes,
there was $66 billion of new physical infrastructure planned over the next 5 years.
Yes.
That's fallen to $51 billion in the last budget. I don't know how having ministers stand around in high vis telling us that things are already happening is going to convince anyone that there's a plan. There's no new money. There's no new jobs. There's nothing of any value. This is frankly a vaporware announcement.
Sorry, Bomber, can I just respond to that? Because I think he's made an interesting point. Number one, if you have a look at the announcement, we're not talking about new money. We're talking about things that have already been announced. And in the business of the high-res vests and the marketing from central casting come the announceables. And the Australian government were really good at it. This New Zealand government is getting better at it than they have before. Announce something that we've already announced and convince everybody that it's new. So $6 billion also is not a huge amount of money to kickstart the economy when you also know, and Craig hopefully might agree with me with this, the one thing coming down the line is the fact that we still don't know what is going to happen to such a small economy when the tariffs start winding their way in. As an example, there are headwinds on their way. And also, just to speak to Sir Roger's point before, I mean, yeah, politicians are lying. They have been telling some fibs over many years. And that's because we've stopped having good, continuous public policy shape our economic future.
Sir Roger, is the government panicking in light of this month's Centrix report that showed the construction industry had lost over 12,000 jobs thanks to the government's 2024 cuts? Is that why they're recycling these announcements?
Well, you'd have to ask them in the end. But the problem is that politicians over the years have learnt that they're often judged by good intentions rather than by results. And if we're going to fix that problem, then the public have got to start to vote for politicians on the basis of their results, rather than, well, I'm not allowed to say that on air, am I?
Bullshit, I think, is the word you're going for there, Sir
well,
Roger.
it might well be.
It may well be.
That they spread.
Follow-up question, are there any Keynesians left on the political right, or is it all Doge, chainsaw, taxpayers union wet dreams now?
I'm not sure.
There are no Keynesians left on the right?
Well, there could be. I think I don't care where they come from. I think that in the end of the day, what we're trying to do is to help ordinary people.
Yes.
And the problem, if I look at New Zealand and the mess they're in, and I've been on this for a long time.
You have.
It all started when Muldoon got rid of Labour's superannuation.
Yeah.
And what we did, we moved to a pay-as-you-go
That's
scheme.
right. That's right.
And pay-as-you-go is a Ponzi scheme. It's a pyramid scheme. It is bound to go bankrupt. And when I formed ACT, it's the very reason I formed ACT. And I pointed out then that we were going to go down the drain. And we're in that situation right now.
Peeni, business investment is now so weak that banks have, I could not believe this, but I double checked it. Banks have not lent any net new money to non-landlord businesses and farmers since May of last year. The government's decision to savagely cut infrastructure spending in 2024 has had an enormous shock and knock-on effect to the entire economy, hasn't it?
That's exactly right. And look, the budget that we've just had in May, they talked about their boost scheme, which is and the slogan was farmers can now buy that tractor.
That's right.
Well,
that's
the fact
right.
of the matter is our people and businesses around the country are keeping their hands in their pockets, looking for calmer weather where there's a bit of security with any kind of loaning or investment that they'll do now. So what we're not seeing from this government is actual, as Sir Rogers pointed out, actual outcomes with these announcements. And so while it sounded good at the time, it's proven that it's actually been a falsehood, and the banks are quite clear on the fact that they're not reaching out, they're not lending money. And of course, that means that there's just not the stimulus in the economy. And the only other thing I'll say to what all the panelists have said is even if you look towards investing into stimulating the economy, our workers have gone. It's as simple as that. If you want a productive economy, you need a workforce, and we should be all concerned about that.
Follow-up question. This government seems to believe on an almost religious level that cutting back the state allows the market to step in and do it cheaper, but we are seeing the bitter harvest that this has created with the collapse in economic activity. When will this government be forced to change direction and start borrowing?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And, you can still borrow and you can, and at the same time, invest in the stimulation of the economy to make sure that you can get the outcomes that you're seeking in growing the economy, growing productivity, which is what we hear from this government. But there's just not the investment there. And, we shouldn't be shy about borrowing. A lot of good businesses in this country do borrow. They're not at the moment because the economic forecast is there's such a downturn.
Matthew, those on higher incomes are benefiting from tax breaks and high term deposit rates, and they're simply increasing their savings. Household term deposits have risen by $25 billion since the election in 2023. The rich got richer, the poor got poorer. Isn't this all Rogers' fault somehow?
I think that's
Well,
right.
it has been. It definitely been for 50 years.
Hang on. What I will say, first of all, is that channeling the ghost of David Longy, I can smell the Labour Party coming forward from his breath. It's there. It's right on the tip of the tongue. I can see it. I can feel it. I can channel it. Now, look, here's the thing. Look, if we're going to be serious about fixing the New Zealand economy, we have to start thinking about investing in our future. That requires us to have a look at all the other implications of things such as the impacts of superannuation, the debt that causes, liability on the books, all of that sort of thing. But more importantly, I think we should not be afraid to have a conversation about sovereign wealth. I mean, Australia has done this very well in terms of their superannuation funds. Have a look at what people like Peter Costello have done, a former Howard government treasurer, and others. Te mea, to coin a phrase. I honestly do think that we get caught in this trap of us and them. I think what we need to do is take a step back, have a cup of tea, as somebody might say, to use an old adage from the 80s and 90s, and reflect on what do we want to build of this country. I mean, the $6 billion, to be frank, $6 billion is chump change when it comes to the infrastructure requirements of our country. We have had rusty, dirty old pipes underground for decades. If we don't do something about it, it's going to blow and it's going to cause a bigger catastrophe than $6 billion would ever do. So my point being, Bomber, to stop channeling the Labour Party coming forth from my comrade's breath, is to say this. Do not be afraid of exploring models like investing in sovereign wealth funds. Singapore have done it extremely well. Australia have continued to do it very well, including the liability of public service debt. And by that I mean the superannuation liability of public servants. Oh my God, I'm sounding like I'm championing the rights of the right now. This is just ridiculous.
Quick round.
I'm not sure you're championing the rights of the right there. If you think about it, what Muldoon did in 1976 threw away a superannuation scheme, which I'd been largely responsible for. And if we'd kept that, people would be retiring today, ordinary New Zealanders would be retiring with more than $1 million and substantially more. So that if they invested that wisely, they'd probably have the average wage in return. And, though we need to really have an open debate. And at the moment, in many ways, the welfare state is about making people dependent upon them. And political parties, Labor Party, National Party, have all designed programs that make people dependent. For me, we should be allowing New Zealanders to be independent, and that's a debate we need to have.
Quick round. Unemployment is 5.1, and it's right now, and it's 10.5% for Māori. Where will it be at the end of the year, Craig Renney?
It'll be at about 5.5%. It'll be a little bit higher for Māori. The big worry is actually for young people. Well, we're seeing unemployment in 15, 24-year-olds rising really rapidly, and that will be where the challenge lies, because the longer that group is unemployed, the more expensive it is to fix in the future, the longer it takes to fix in the future, and the deeper the scarring effect it has on their careers and their earnings for the rest of their lives.
Matthew, where's it going to be?
So, just focusing on Māori unemployment for a moment, Māori unemployment is traditionally higher than the average for other New Zealanders. So, on my estimation, unemployment amongst Māori is going to be above 9% on average. And I think also when you have a look at the deeper figure, and Peeni can maybe support this, I don't know, but one of the biggest challenges in this by-election is getting unemployment amongst Māori under control in the biggest city in the country, the biggest part of the national economy. So, you can dance around all you want. You can have debates, you can have hikoi, you can have committee meetings and all these other things. But at the end of the day, people just want to know where the job is coming from.
Sir Roger, where's unemployment going to be at the end of the year?
I'm not sure. I probably don't keep up as well as I used to on the numbers, but I think it comes back. We did a disservice with welfare for Māori. Māori were making their own way, and over the last 30, 40 years, we've made a lot of them depend on the government paying and giving them, and that's a shame for the economy. I mean, if you look 100 years ago, Māori were standing up, independent, striving, and we never actually dealt with their move to the cities in the way we should have, and we have to get back to that. But for me, it's about independence, and what I said before, get rid of dependency, because a lot of it is designed.
Peeni, unemployment rate, where it's going to be?
Look, for Māori, I think it'll be about 11.5%. But I think what should be more concerning for all of us is that young people under the age of 25, the Māori unemployment rate there is over 20%.
Wow.
And there doesn't seem to be enough opportunity for them to either train for a trade or into a workforce, and opportunities for them to do that. So we should be very concerned, and I heard Craig talk about that intergenerational scar that comes from that. We're setting them up to fail.
Comrades, we need to move on to issue 2 tonight. Inflation is spiking and economic growth is drooping. So what new ideas should our late-stage capitalism attempt, Sir Roger? You and Professor Robert McCulloch released this month a radical new tax plan focused on putting your taxes into your own savings rather than going to the government if you're earning under $60,000. Can you flesh that out for us a bit?
Sure. Just before I do, though, over the in New Zealand, politicians, we were moving towards bankruptcy if we don't watch it. And what we have done, and most countries have done this, so I don't want to sound as if I'm just getting at New Zealand and New Zealand politicians, but we have robbed the young and we have robbed our children. And that really comes back to that super. We owe, we talk about debt, but the real debt is around $2 trillion of unfunded liabilities. That's in terms of health and superannuation for the retired. And sometimes we say, and people and politicians, of course, want to help the disadvantaged and what have you. But do you realise, if you do the numbers, that someone on 44,000, which is the lowest paid, that's the rate I think is what, $20 or something?
Yeah.
$20.50. You multiply that, and you'd get out to 44. You know, if people were allowed to invest their own money in an approved scheme, you know what they'd retire with if they started working at 18 and went through to, I'm thinking 50 years' time, probably we'll all be working until, say, 68. They'd retire on $4 million. And if their partner was working, they'd retire on 8. But the problem that we're having now is we're going to go bankrupt.
Follow-up question. You've been quite scathing of the ACT Party, recently describing it as losing the plot on welfare. Your suggestion, when I was reading it this last week, sounds a little bit more like the basic universal income. As a voter, you haven't moved away from ACT and towards TOP?
I haven't moved to the universal.
Okay. But you do talk about for those under 60,000.
I've read about it. But I remember the person who first floated that was an American economist, and I read about it in the Economist, and I thought, gee, that sounds all right. I got off. I was actually flying, and I jumped off at the next stop and went in and bought that book. And the problem with it is it all sounds good,
yes,
but you get very high marginal tax rates
right
at the end of the day, and I just don't think it works at all. But
so you're not voting for TOP this next election?
Well, they might adopt my policy.
Peeni. Dita Deboni reports last week that the government is trumpeting the fact that 215 applications have so far been received for the rejigged golden visa categories, with $1 billion in new money landing this year if all those who applied are approved. Is that what we've become now? A country selling citizenship to multi-millionaires to prop up our economy? Is that really what we are now?
Look, and we shouldn't be surprised by that. It's been a signal by this government in the past to allow those who are wealthy the opportunity
to buy citizenship,
buy their way into this country in the hope that some magic wand will help them invest into this country, and all of a sudden our problems will be solved. And let's be very clear too, the cuts that they made in the public sector are going to struggle to process most of those, and that's literally what's happening at the moment. So if we think that that's going to be our golden goose to take us to economic prosperity, I think we're dreaming.
Follow-up question. Wouldn't a radical idea be to tax the billionaires and the mega wealthy? We're still waiting for a tax policy from the Labour Party.
Yeah, that's right. And that's been a robust debate that you'll
Hasn't
know.
it just?
And David Parker, I know, was a big part of that.
I think my policy of the first 60,000 being tax-free and allowing people, and that would result in a 10,000 reduction, allowing them to have $6,000 for their super and $4,000 to have health cover.
Labor should just pick up the idea. Is that what you're saying?
I knew there was a bit of Labor.
I thought it was going. But Matthew, inflation figures have confirmed the government's economic strategy is failing, with the economy sinking into stagflation just over a year out from the next election. The PM and the Finance Minister keep blaming Labor, yet much of the recent indicators are directly driven by the government's policies. When will voters start blaming the government?
I think they already are. I mean, the National Party, the coalition government is on the down. It appears that one of the only people on the way up is Winston. Lazarus with a triple bypass. He's right into it. But look, here's the thing. Inflation is creeping towards the top of the band as dictated by the government's own policy of a multiple years of Reserve Bank Act, right? So that's all there. The challenge that this government has, which will be what the next government will face, is those economic headwinds around the world are heading in our direction. And while it used to be that we might get a little bit of a cold snap from a breeze coming through the window, in some cases it's going to be a lot bigger than that. And so the problem that we've got, and I guess speaking to part of Roger's point, and maybe it wasn't a point he was making, but unless we get our debt under control, then what we're going to find is we're increasingly going to run the risk of never having anything away in our tank for a rainy day. We're always going to be chasing our tails. And if I could finally just say that, this sort of detail and the sort of adult conversations we need to be having around the kitchen table, not all this other distractionary nonsense that Seymour's been taking us on, such as the Treaty Principles Bill and all this other sort of stuff. I mean, let's have a conversation about the big ticket items instead of all this other distraction.
What I'd like to know is, if squirrels have got enough brains to save, why the hell don't we?
Craig,
they've got nuts, right? They've got nuts.
Craig, inflation is rising back towards 3% later this year, with prices of essentials like food, rent, rates, electricity and petrol prices rising twice as fast as disposable income for renters. Where's the growth we were promised? What should we be doing?
Well, we cancelled the growth because we cancelled the only engines of growth we've had over the past few decades. House prices was the driver of growth. Population was the big driver of economic growth. We've seen migration fall. We've seen house prices basically go nowhere. We're essentially working against 250 years of economic history. We're trying to impoverish a part of the population and then work out why we're poorer. It's absolutely crazy, right? We have very little long-term planning in New Zealand. We have a $200 billion infrastructure gap, and we're celebrating spending $6 billion on infrastructure that we were going to spend anyway.
Yeah.
At the same time, we've got household energy prices going up 9.1%. We've got gas prices, for those who use it, going up 15%. But we generate exactly the same amount of electricity as we did 10 years ago, right? We need to get better at this. So, let's have some actual radical thinking here. Let's stop trying to be the terrible economic manager, trying to destroy anything of economic value in New Zealand, right? And let's actually build for the long term. Let's actually build some state housing when we've got 15,000 fewer people working in construction. Let's actually make early childhood education genuinely free rather than the omni-shambles that is the Family Boost program.
Preach.
Right?
Follow-up question. Environment Canterbury has approved dairy conversions for over 15,000 additional cows in 6 months. How is more cows an economic vision?
It's not. And it's not an economic plan. But then again, we haven't had an economic plan from the government. We've had a document called Going for Growth, which is 80 bullet points looking for a home. Right? We've had a series of budget documents, right, which have been essentially economics free. Right? They've been. We hope that we cut taxes. We hope that we cut spending. And we hope that the Reserve Bank rides like the 7th Cavalry over the hill to cut interest rates so that mortgage rates goes down and we all feel better off, right? That's not a plan, right? A plan actually is something that says what's wrong with the country, how are we going to fix it, and how will we know that we're there? And we don't have any of that from the government right now.
Comrades,
we need to come up with some sensible solutions, though. When we talk about building more state houses, a state house costs the best part of $1 million to build. If we move to use that $1 million on a shared ownership basis, we could free up 5 to 10 existing houses and move people who have almost got the deposit into their own house. And in doing that way...
Roger, that really doesn't work. What you're doing.
What do you mean it doesn't work?
It doesn't work. It doesn't work. You're just injecting more money into a housing market that doesn't have the supply. That just puts house prices up.
Comrades,
come on! I hope you weren't the advisor to Robertson, were you, when he increased house prices by more than anyone else? God help me.
Comrades, we need to move on to issue 3 tonight, and that was the Minister of Defence's comments to army recruits to prepare for war. Matthew, shouldn't politicians be working to keep us out of war rather than preparing us for them?
Look, this is where I get a bit off kilter, and Peeni will probably be much better at answering this question than I. I think we've got this whole defence thing round the back front door. We have a significant economic zone that we need to protect. We earn a lot of money from this economic zone into the Pacific and around our nation, fisheries and all the rest of it. We need a sustainable defence force that does what we need it to do. I think all this chit-chat about talking about war and sending our troops overseas does nothing in terms of our country. Our economic circumstances rely on what goes on in our regions, and quite frankly, with the sinking of the Manua Nui, which was just astounding, we need to make investments in protecting our economic sanctuaries, and that's full stop. Now, Judith rocking around in whatever she was wearing on the day, again, distraction, politics, don't care. Whatever she was doing and saying, again, don't care. We need to take a very longer view of investment in our defence force, and that, I'm going to just say preach.
Craig, America was pushing Australia to commit to fighting with China before America had even declared war on China. Why should New Zealand want to get involved in a Trump war?
It absolutely shouldn't.
No.
It's the honest answer. It has absolutely no cause to. It's almost axiomatic. If Trump is asking you to do it, then you should probably not. In terms of defence, let's not go there. Matthew said it much better than I. We've suddenly been able to find $12 billion for new defence equipment, but yet we can't house people. We've just kicked out thousands of people in emergency housing to save $1 billion of money. Right? There are better priorities for this cash that will deliver long-term benefits in this country. We don't need to be getting involved in these foreign adventures when they don't affect us at all. They're just simply countries like the US trying to assert their dominance in places like the Pacific.
Peeni, you are Labour's spokesperson for defence. Who are we going to war with?
Yeah, exactly. And that inflammatory kind of statement from our current Minister of Defence certainly is not helpful. And when we're trying to discuss these important matters to New Zealand, I will say this, though, towards the investment in defence. And, we do also have a duty to look towards the Pacific and to support our Pacific brothers and sisters in the Pacific, and that is going to cost. It's going to take some investment. And one thing that I think pretty sure we'll all agree on is New Zealand's very, very good at sweating their assets right to the end. And the fact of the matter is there needs to be some investment in defence.
Well, that's right.
And only the government can do it.
Yeah.
Well, just recently, the 3 C-130 Hercules, who have been in New Zealand's Air Force since, the 1960s or thereabouts, very well maintained, in excellent nick. All of a sudden, they found a new life in Canada with Coulson Aviation fighting the wildfires. And that's the integrity of what we have built over many years.
Sir Roger, we have a lot of politicians working for war and not enough working for peace. Should New Zealand resist getting into war with anyone?
Well, look, I'm not going to can't answer that because I don't know what the situation is. But I will say, picking up the point, is that the government is the only person who is able to make the big judgments in the areas of defence and law and order. That is their number one role. All these other things are important, housing, etc., super, education and that, but you can't get away from the fact that the responsibility of any government is to look after its citizens and to protect them. So that's where I come from.
Yep.
It's the protection of and doing what's best for the New Zealand citizens. So we're not going to be led by, down any particular path unless it's in the interest of our own people.
Comrades, we need to wrap the show with a final word. Matthew, your final word this week, please,
So
sir.
it's more a portion of Sir Roger Douglas's former valedictory speech when he left Parliament. And yes, I have read the whole thing, but there's one that sticks out to me, and it's channeling Muldoon, because you've channeled Muldoon tonight, so I think it's apt and I think it's very appropriate. After 1971, Muldoon would come in here at 2 o'clock, create absolute havoc, and then leave. It sounds a little bit like history repeating itself with Mr. Seymour coming in, creating havoc on issues that are not necessarily important to New Zealand at this point in time, creating havoc. And the only other thing that does that is a wombat. A wombat eats, shits and leaves. You can tell there's a bit of Australian still in me.
Craig, your final word this week, please, sir.
If I could have a word and a number, please, Bomber. A word is actually Sir Roger's word. Truth. The economic settings that we have right now aren't working. The current government settings that we have right now aren't working, and we need an honest conversation about how we're going to fix them. Because right now we're heading back potentially into recession. We're certainly heading back into negative growth. We're seeing much higher unemployment, and we're setting ourselves up for some long-term pain. And the number, as ever, Bomber, is 466. That's the number of days until the next election.
Preach. Sir Roger, your final word tonight, please, sir.
Well, I think we've got to tackle our big problems, and our big problems is in the relation to our unfunded liabilities. I think if we can move down the path of what, like Singapore has in Australia, where every individual New Zealander has their own super account, and which would cover in retirement not just super pensions but health care, we'd be a lot better off. And if we did that, we'd do it at a fraction of the price. Because when someone on 45,000, if they were allowed to use their own tax, so don't say they can't afford it, they're paying the tax, so let them put it in their own account and we can move forward.
Sounds like an old school Labour Party remit.
Peeni, your final word this week, please.
I haven't changed, you see. It's the Labour Party. They left me. I didn't leave them.
Peeni, your final word this evening, please.
Look, be it not for me to shamelessly promote a by-election, but I will say
Please
this.
do.
One of the common threads in this discussion is good policy debate. And in order to do that, one, we must be engaged, and two, we must vote. And that's my final word.
Thank you,
Good
comrades. And now to my final word for the week. Brothers and sisters, it is with deep anger and enormous fury that I report to you all that Seeger House has indeed been shut down. Of all the shitty things this government has done, cancelling Seeger House is surely the shittiest. Comrades, there are few jewels in the mental health infrastructure quite like Seeger House, and the obscene decision to close it will end up costing us much more. Those at Seeger House are people with enormous mental health issues and problems. If they are not in Seeger House, they are losing it in public and either damaging themselves or others. You'll see their costs explode in ACC, the police call-outs, the ambulance call-outs, the hospital costs and the judiciary costs. All that will happen now is emergency crisis teams across Auckland will be jammed full of people from Sega House. Look, I appreciate the vast majority of you won't know about this place. Most of us are working our fingers to the bone just trying to keep ourselves and our whānau above water. But these people are some of the most vulnerable. They have no voice, no platform, and no political muscle. If we won't stand for them, who will? We have money for tobacco subsidies, the military, rich landlords and property speculators, but we don't have enough for one of the few places those hurt by the trauma of life can get healed. God defend New Zealand, because this government sure as Christ won't. In solidarity, the revolution continues. Ka pai Aotearoa.
The Bradbury Group, New Zealand's best weekly political argument. The Bradbury Group is an independent